Where did 3i Atlas come from? The simplest answer is also the most unsettling. It came from outside. From beyond the sun, beyond the familiar chain of planets, beyond even the ghostly frontier where the frozen bodies of the Oort cloud drift. 3i Atlas is an interstellar visitor, a fragment, a shard of matter that does not belong to our solar system. It was not born in the warmth of our sun. It did not share childhood with Earth. It never joined the careful dance of planets circling home. It arrived from another star. And at once your mind opens to the next question. Which star? Which corner of the galaxy? Perhaps it was cast out from a young system, where worlds were colliding like unruly marbles. And in that chaos a fragment was hurled away with enough speed to escape the gravity of its native sun. Or maybe it came from an older system, one that had been stable for eons until something shifted. A subtle tug, a near pass with a giant planet, and suddenly the object was unmoored, flung into exile. That's the second answer. 3i Atlas did not come from a place we can pinpoint on a map. It came from a journey so long that the memory of its birthplace has been erased. It is a cosmic castaway. And when you think of it that way, you realize the real question isn't only where did it come from, but what does it mean to come from anywhere in the universe at all? Consider it, planets stay tethered. Stars orbit slowly, bound into the spiraling arms of the galaxy, but objects expelled into the void. They have no home, only open trajectories. 3i Atlas is one of them. Its voyage may have begun before Earth even existed. It may have been wandering the dark while the very ingredients of life were only beginning to stir in ancient oceans. What we know is this: it entered our solar system like a stranger crossing through a city for a single day, never stopping, never returning. And so you wonder, what kind of universe gives rise to travelers like this? You start with the image of a young star system, a star not unlike our sun still swaddled in its dusty birth cloud. Around it disks of rock and ice swirl chaotically, colliding, sticking, breaking apart. Worlds are forming, but not all matter finds its place. Some fragments are left over, some are broken loose. A giant planet passes close to a smaller body, and gravity does what gravity always does. It pulls, it slings, it redirects. One unlucky fragment is accelerated so fiercely that it escapes forever, no longer orbiting its star, no longer anchored to its origin, just loose and free and doomed. That fragment could wander for millions, even billions of years. Across the black corridors between stars it drifts. No engine, no map, just momentum. If you pause here, you can almost feel the strangeness of its solitude. The darkness is not empty, radiation, dust, and the faint glow of distant stars surround it. But for all practical purposes, it is alone. No warmth, no voice, just time stretching endlessly. Now imagine that one day, after perhaps longer than the Earth itself has existed, that fragment drifts into the neighborhood of our sun. It doesn't seek us out. It doesn't aim. It simply happens to cross our path. And suddenly, astronomers scanning the skies notice something moving in a way that shouldn't be possible. Its orbit is too sharp, its speed is too high, it is not bound to the sun. That's how we know 3i Atlas is an interstellar traveler. The orbit is the giveaway. Objects born in our solar system follow familiar curves, bound by the invisible leash of gravity. But Atlas did not follow those rules. Its path is hyperbolic, an open arc that reveals its true story. It came from outside and it is leaving again. And yet, the more you learn, the less complete the answer feels. It came from another star system, yes, but which one? Astronomers tried tracing its trajectory backward, plotting the line through the galaxy, hoping to see where it might have passed near a known star in the distant past. But the farther back they traced, the blurrier the line became. Galactic tides, invisible clouds of gas, countless tiny gravitational nudges, all of them conspire to erase the path. So the origin of 3i Atlas remains hidden. Somewhere out there, in the crowded expanse of the Milky Way, lies the cradle that cast it away. But we will never know which one. This is the paradox. You asked a simple question, where did it come from? The answer is clear and yet incomplete. It came from another star system, but not one we can name, not one we can point to, just another. And there is something strangely humbling in that. Because when you realize this, you understand that the universe is littered with these fragments, not just one, not just three like the interstellar objects we have detected so far, but billions, trillions, endless shards cast off by countless systems across cosmic time, all wandering the galaxy like seeds drifting in the wind. 3i Atlas is one of those seeds, a single example of a much greater truth, that the galaxy is not static but restless, that stars and planets and fragments are constantly trading pieces with one another in ways too vast and too slow for us to see, until one of those pieces suddenly crosses our path. So where did 3i Atlas come from? From a distant star, yes. From a forgotten system, yes. But more deeply, it came from the restless process of creation itself. From the violence of worlds colliding, the chaos of orbits shifting, the relentless physics of gravity flinging matter into exile. And if you follow that thought to its end, you realize something. This object, this small piece of rock or ice, is not just a stranger to our solar system. It is a message. A reminder that the boundaries we imagine around our home are not sealed, that we are connected to the wider galaxy not just through light and radiation but through matter itself, through travelers, through exiles. And tonight, as you trace its story, you can feel the quiet gravity of that truth settling around you. We are not isolated. We are not apart. The universe shares itself, sometimes in beams of light from stars far away, sometimes in silent travelers like 3i Atlas. And once you see it this way, another question starts to rise. If this fragment came here, how many others are out there waiting? If this fragment came here, how many others are out there waiting? It is not a rhetorical question. Astronomers have run the numbers. They have taken the evidence of a few fleeting visitors, Oumuamua, 2i/Borisov, and now 3i Atlas, and asked, what does their existence imply about the galaxy? The answer is staggering. There may be as many interstellar objects wandering the Milky Way as there are stars, perhaps more. A near-infinite flotilla of castaway rocks and icy bodies, drifting invisibly between the suns, unlit and unclaimed. Picture it for a moment. You imagine the galaxy as you've seen it in photographs, those spiraling arms glowing in blues and golds. But behind the glow in the unseen dark are uncountable fragments, each one an exile from its home system, each one a messenger of distant origins, each one a reminder that what we call our solar system is not a sealed-off place but a crossroads where strangers sometimes pass. 3i Atlas was one of those strangers. It appeared briefly in the year 2020, and then it was gone. We barely had time to study it before it broke apart, dissolving like a ghost into the dark. And yet, in that short window, it left us with a haunting idea. If we can glimpse one, then there must be many more. And here is where your intuition begins to falter, because the human mind does not easily grasp abundance on this scale. A handful of visitors you can imagine, a galaxy full of them, that thought drifts somewhere beyond comprehension. But science insists. The math tells us that ejection is common, that in the tumultuous birth of stars and planets, debris is constantly flung outward, not rarely, not occasionally, constantly. The galaxy is seeded with fragments. So perhaps the better question is not where did 3i Atlas come from, but why wouldn't it exist? Why wouldn't we expect to see such travelers, now and again, sliding silently across our skies? And yet you resist the idea, because there's something about this one, about 3i Atlas, that makes it feel different, personal almost, not because of what it was, but because of what it meant. Think about the timing. Humanity has been gazing at the stars for thousands of years. For nearly all of that time, we assumed the sky above was self-contained, a stage with familiar actors, the planets, the comets, the stars beyond. But only in the last few years did we learn for certain that interstellar visitors are real. First Oumuamua in 2017, then Borisov in 2019, then Atlas in 2020, 3 in quick succession after millennia of silence. Why now? Was it coincidence? Or did we simply reach the threshold where our telescopes, our surveys, our software finally became sharp enough to notice? If so, then the implication is breathtaking. There may have been countless others that passed through before, unseen. The night sky could have been full of visitors, brushing by us in secret. And here's another thought, one that arrives slowly, almost reluctantly. Every fragment like 3i Atlas carries with it the chemical fingerprints of its home. The ices, the rocks, the dust, all shaped by the environment of its birth star. If we could study one closely, if we could touch it, drill into it, taste its minerals, we would be touching another solar system, another history, another possibility. That realization is dizzying because we are used to distance as a barrier. Distant stars feel unreachable, separated from us by centuries of travel, even at the speed of light. But these objects break that rule. They come here, they cross the gulf for us. They are emissaries of elsewhere, delivered into our own backyard. So when you ask where 3i Atlas came from, the answer is both distant and intimate. Distant because its exact birthplace is lost. Intimate because in its brief visit, the galaxy itself brushed close. You linger on that image, the galaxy reaching out not in light but in substance. A fragment breaking the illusion of isolation. A reminder that space is not empty. It is restless, flowing, exchanging. And yet there's something tragic about the story of Atlas. Unlike Borisov, which sailed past intact, Atlas disintegrated as it neared the sun. Its structure failed, its body broke apart, and what was once a coherent traveler became a cloud of fragments. We lost it. Before we could learn much, it was gone. And maybe that's part of why it haunts you, because it arrived carrying secrets and then dissolved before we could unlock them. It was the traveler who refused to tell its story. It was the book whose pages turned to dust in your hands. Still, the silence teaches something. It tells you that origin is not always about location. Sometimes origin is about motion, about process. 3i Atlas was born in the violence of creation. Its identity is not a single star, but the universal act of scattering, an act that every planetary system participates in. So where did it come from? From chaos, from collision, from the inevitability of things breaking loose. In that sense, it came from everywhere, from the galaxy itself. Pause for a moment and imagine the galaxy as an ocean. Stars are islands clustered together in archipelagos. Around each island, debris gathers. Some of it settles, some of it circles, but some of it is carried away by tides, drifting endlessly between the islands. 3i Atlas was one of those drifters, and when it entered our skies, it was as if a piece of another island washed up on our shore. You stand on that shore looking out at the waves, and you know there are countless more pieces out there drifting, some small, some vast, some carrying chemicals never seen in our solar system, some carrying perhaps the building blocks of life. And now another question rises. If these fragments wander everywhere, could they also carry more than minerals? Could they carry the seeds of biology, frozen and hidden, waiting for a chance encounter? You don't have to answer yet. You only have to let the thought expand in you gently, like the night sky unfolding overhead. For now, you return to the first truth. 3i Atlas came from outside, from another star, from another time, from the restless motion of the galaxy itself. Its origin is unknowable and yet universal. It is not one place, it is all places. And the mystery it leaves behind is not just about its past, but about our future. If fragments like this wander constantly, then one day, inevitably, another will come. Perhaps closer, perhaps larger, perhaps one that will not break apart before we learn its secrets. The universe, after all, does not deal in scarcity. It deals in abundance. And 3i Atlas was only one among many. The universe, after all, does not deal in scarcity. It deals in abundance. And 3i Atlas was only one among many. But abundance is not the same as understanding. You know this from your own life. To stand in a crowded room does not mean you know the people inside it. To walk through a forest filled with trees does not mean you understand the story of each root, each branch, each scar carved by wind and storm. The galaxy is the same. Countless fragments may wander through the void, but each one is a stranger. Each one carries its own secret past. And with 3i Atlas, that secret stayed hidden. Still, there is value in what little we did see. Astronomers caught its faint glow as it entered our skies. They tracked its speed, its angle, its strange hyperbolic orbit. From those numbers alone, one truth rang out: this was not one of ours. It was not a comet born in the frozen edges of the Oort cloud. It was not a remnant of our solar system's youth. Its path told the story clearly. It came from outside, and it was leaving again. The elegance of that realization is almost poetic. Not because of what we learned, but because of how little was required. A few points of light on a chart, a curve that refused to close. The math whispered what the eye could not see: this one is a visitor. And maybe that is why 3i Atlas has stayed in your mind. Because it reminded you that truth does not always shout. Sometimes it arrives quietly, hidden in the geometry of an orbit. You picture the object itself as best as you can. Perhaps it was a block of ice, fragile under the warmth of our sun. Perhaps it was dust, loosely bound, more fragile than a snowflake. Perhaps it was something stranger, some hybrid between rock and vapor. We will never know for certain, but for a brief time it glowed faintly in our skies, leaving behind a trace of its existence. And then it broke apart, like a story cut short, like a voice silenced mid-sentence. There's a kind of melancholy in that, because it suggests that even the visitors who cross our path are not eternal. They are fragile, they are mortal. Just as planets die, just as stars burn out, so too do fragments crumble under the stress of passing too near a sun. But there's another way to see it, not as loss but as transformation. When Atlas broke apart, it released its dust, its vapors, its secrets into space. Some of those particles are still out there now, mingling with the faint winds of our solar system. In a way, Atlas left a trace of itself behind, not a body but a cloud, not a voice but an echo. And that thought invites you deeper into the metaphor. What does it mean to come from somewhere if you do not last long enough to tell your story? Does your origin still matter if you fall apart before anyone can listen? The silence of Atlas suggests an answer. Yes, because origin is not just about memory, it is about existence itself. To arrive here, to pass through, was already enough. Even in breaking apart, Atlas carried its truth. It came from outside. The more you sit with that, the more the idea stretches. It is not only about Atlas, it is about us. We too are fragments of origin, pieces of a larger story flung into the present by forces beyond our choosing. We too carry histories we cannot fully remember, histories of stardust, of ancient collisions, of stars that died long before the Earth was born. You look at the interstellar traveler and you see yourself reflected. Not in size, not in shape, but in essence. A being defined by motion, by origin, by fragility. And perhaps that is why the question haunts you so much. Where did it come from is also a question you ask of yourself, though in quieter tones. You wonder about the stars that built the atoms in your blood. You wonder about the chain of chance that carried your life to this exact moment. You wonder if your own path, like Atlas' is a brief arc, open, unbound, fleeting. There's something soothing in this symmetry, because it reminds you that you are not apart from the universe, but part of it. The questions you ask of Atlas are the same questions you ask of your own being. The answers may be incomplete, but they bind you to the cosmos in ways words cannot capture. Still, let's return to the science, because the science itself is no less beautiful. To imagine the path of 3i Atlas is to imagine a thread stretching across the galaxy. A thread woven into the larger fabric of the Milky Way. When you tug on it, you cannot trace it back to its beginning, but you know it connects to something vast. Some star, some collision, some forgotten moment of chaos long ago. Astronomers know this too. That is why they strain to measure every flicker, every orbit, every shred of dust left behind. Not because they hope to solve the mystery completely, but because each fragment adds to a larger mosaic. The more visitors we record, the clearer the pattern becomes. One day, perhaps, the statistics will speak louder than the silence of any single traveler. For now, though, Atlas is a story without an ending. It came, it broke apart, it left. And in its wake, it left us with questions. Questions that refuse to close. Questions that stretch into the dark. Questions that invite you to lean back, to breathe slowly, to imagine. Imagine the galaxy again, restless with fragments. Imagine the silent caravans of rocks and ices drifting endlessly. Imagine one of them entering our skies as Atlas did, glowing faintly before breaking apart. And imagine that behind each fragment is a birthplace, a system with its own planets, its own suns, its own possibilities. That is the answer to the question, not a single point on a star map, but a truth spread across the galaxy. 3i Atlas came from elsewhere. It came from the restless abundance of the cosmos. It came from the same forces that flung dust into the air from the collision of worlds, the same forces that will one day scatter the debris of our own solar system into the dark. And now, as you hold this thought, the story begins to shift. Because there is something about Atlas that your intuition may not be ready for, something that does not fit neatly into the narrative you have built so far. The idea that interstellar visitors are rare, that their arrival is a miracle. What if that intuition is wrong? What if the truth is stranger, more unsettling, more vast than that? Hold that question close and let it carry you into the next part of the journey. You've been picturing 3i Atlas as something rare, a chance encounter, a cosmic lottery ticket that drifted into our sky. That's the natural way to think about it, because our intuition insists that visitors from the stars should be extraordinary, that if something comes from another system, it must be a once-in-a-lifetime event. But intuition is a poor guide when it comes to the scale of the galaxy. And here is the truth that begins to unsettle you. 3i Atlas was not rare, not in the way you imagine. The math does not lie. If we detected 3 interstellar visitors in just a handful of years, Oumuamua, Borisov and Atlas, then the sky is not empty. The sky is crowded. You cannot see them with your eyes, but statistically there are countless others, moving silently, invisibly all around. Think about what that means. The night sky you see when you step outside is not just a dome of stars, but a river of motion. Rocks, ices, dust, entire mountains of matter drifting between the stars, weaving paths that intersect ours. They do not announce themselves. They do not glow unless sunlight happens to strike them, but they are there, always there. And so the intuition that interstellar visitors are extraordinary is already broken. The extraordinary thing is not that 3i Atlas came to us. The extraordinary thing is that we noticed. Pause with that thought, because it flips the story upside down. For thousands of years, fragments like Atlas may have been sweeping through our solar system, sliding past our planets, grazing our skies, but until recently our eyes were blind to them. They came and went, invisible, forgotten, leaving no record. If that's true, then what happened in 2020 was not the birth of a new phenomenon. It was the lifting of a veil. The galaxy has always been scattering its fragments across our path. Only now do we finally see them. And once you accept that, another intuition crumbles, because you want to imagine these visitors as small, fleeting, harmless. But there is no law of the cosmos that says they must be small. The galaxy does not tailor its travelers to our comfort. Imagine something the size of a moon, an interstellar body drifting silently into our system. Not a comet, not a fragile snowball, but a massive rocky world unbound from any star. These too exist. They are called rogue planets, worlds ejected from their birth systems, wandering the dark alone. Some may be the size of Earth, some larger. The Milky Way could be filled with more rogue planets than stars. And if that is true, then 3i Atlas was not a strange exception. It was just a small example of a much larger truth. The galaxy is restless and nothing is fixed in place forever. The thought is not comforting, because it suggests that space is not a quiet background but a storm. A slow storm, yes, measured in millions of years, but a storm nonetheless. Worlds flung out, fragments cast off, collisions inevitable. And here you sit, on a small planet circling one ordinary star, realizing that safety is not guaranteed. Not by gravity, not by distance, not by any comforting illusion of isolation. The universe does not care for walls. It is open, always open. This realization presses on you and you feel a subtle unease, because it challenges a hidden belief you carry, the belief that our solar system is a kind of fortress, a closed room where only familiar comets and asteroids drift, but the truth is harsher. There are doors everywhere, and through those doors strangers enter. Some break apart like Atlas, some pass silently like Borisov, some may never be seen at all. And if you follow that thread far enough, you arrive at the deepest break in your intuition yet. Origin itself may not matter as much as you think. You asked, where did 3i Atlas come from? You imagined an answer like a return address, some star, some system, some birthplace you could point to. But the longer you trace the question, the more slippery it becomes. Because what matters is not the birthplace, but the journey. What matters is the process, not the coordinate. Atlas came from the same place all fragments come from instability, from violence, from the restless reshaping of matter. Whether that happened near one star or another becomes almost irrelevant because the pattern is universal. Every star ejects, every system spills. The galaxy is full of orphans. So when you hold the question again, where did it come from? You begin to realize that the answer is not one star, one system, one map coordinate. The answer is, it came from the nature of the universe itself, from the fact that nothing stays in place forever. That realization is not easy to sit with, because it demands that you give up the comfort of specific answers. It demands that you accept a broader truth. Origin is not a point. Origin is a process. And perhaps that is the most difficult intuition to break, because we are wired to think of beginnings as singular, a birthplace, a moment, a first cause. But in the universe, beginnings are not neat, they are scattered, they are collective, they are woven into chaos. 3i Atlas is proof. It is not one story but many. The story of a star forming, the story of planets colliding, the story of a fragment being flung into exile, the story of a galaxy restless with motion. Its origin is not one thread but a tapestry. And if you want to know where it came from, you have to be willing to let go of the simplicity of maps and coordinates, and instead embrace the messiness of creation. You breathe into that thought slowly. It feels uncomfortable but also freeing. Because if origin is not a single point, then neither is destiny. If Atlas can wander across the galaxy, perhaps you too are not bound to the illusions of permanence. Perhaps your own story is not one thread, but a woven fabric of countless motions, countless causes. The object becomes a mirror again, not just a visitor, but a teacher, breaking your intuition so that you can see more clearly. And as you rest in that realization, a new question rises quietly in the back of your mind. If origin is a process, then what does that make home? You want the story of 3i Atlas to close neatly, to end with a clear answer, a pin dropped on some distant star, a straight line drawn from there to here. But the more you follow the thread, the more it frays. Because what if the very question, where did it come from, is not as solid as it feels? What if origin itself is a mirage? A word too blunt to carve into the complexity of the universe. Your intuition resists this. It wants to believe in beginnings, in single points of truth. You were born in a certain place at a certain time. So was the earth, so was the sun. Surely the same must apply to Atlas. Surely there must be a coordinate, a birthplace, an address. But the cosmos does not bend to human categories. The more you try to trace Atlas backward, the less precise the trail becomes. 1,000 gravitational nudges blur the path. Galactic tides bend the trajectory. Encounters with clouds of gas smear the line until all that's left is uncertainty. And so another intuition breaks, that every question has a single, sharp answer. In truth, some questions unravel the moment you ask them. Think of it this way. Imagine tracing your own origin backward. You could say you were born in one city on one date, but that is not the whole truth. Your body carries atoms forged in stars that died billions of years ago. Your DNA carries patterns written by ancestors you will never know. Your mind carries ideas shaped by cultures, languages, histories that stretch far beyond you. Where did you come from? There is no single answer. There are layers, there are infinities. 3i Atlas is the same. Yes, it was expelled from some star system, but that system was shaped by others before it, by collisions of clouds, by generations of stars living and dying, scattering elements, scattering fragments, scattering possibilities. Atlas is not the child of one place. It is the descendant of the galaxy itself. That realization is dizzying, because it collapses the neat picture you wanted, the postcard image of a visitor from another star. Instead, what you're left with is an object that belongs not to one place but to everywhere. A fragment of a process that repeats across billions of systems, across billions of years. And here comes the deeper paradox. If Atlas belongs everywhere, does it really belong anywhere? You pause with that thought. You let it sink into you like a stone dropped into deep water. Because it is not only about astronomy, it is about existence itself. How often do you long for a single origin, a place to anchor identity? How often do you crave the comfort of a neat answer to, "Where do I come from?" Yet the truth is always more complex. You are a web of influences, not a single thread. You are a story with many beginnings, not one. And that realization, unsettling though it is, opens space for something else: freedom. If Atlas has no single home, then it is not defined by exile. It is defined by motion. If you too are more than a single origin, then you are not confined to one story. You are part of many. The fragment becomes a mirror again, not a relic of elsewhere, but a lesson in belonging everywhere. Still, the human mind resists. It craves closure. It wants the comfort of coordinates. So it pushes back. Surely Atlas must have come from a particular system. Surely with better telescopes, sharper software, more powerful models, we could trace it back. And perhaps someday we will. Perhaps one day technology will reconstruct its blurred path with enough precision to point toward a star. But even then, the answer will not be as clean as it seems, because that star too is only part of a larger process. That star too was built from pieces scattered across time. Origin in the cosmic sense is never singular. It is collective, it is endless. And once you grasp that, another intuition begins to fall apart. The intuition that knowing means closing. That understanding means drawing a line under a question and declaring it solved. But what if understanding means the opposite? What if it means keeping the question open, living inside it, letting it expand your vision without ever fully closing? 3i Atlas teaches this too. It came, it broke apart, it left. It offered no tidy conclusion, no neat signature. And yet in that silence it taught us something profound, that the galaxy is restless, that fragments wander, that home is fragile, that origin is plural. That is not nothing. That is wisdom disguised as absence. And maybe that is the hardest intuition to break, the belief that answers must be final. In truth, the universe gives us answers that deepen the mystery. The more you learn, the more you realize how much remains unknown. You sit with that paradox. It feels uncomfortable but also strangely peaceful, because it mirrors the rhythm of your own life. Every answer you've ever found has only led to new questions. Every certainty has dissolved with time, and yet in that unfolding you have grown. So perhaps the story of 3i Atlas is not meant to resolve. Perhaps it is meant to remind you that life itself is a series of broken intuitions, a series of doors that open onto deeper rooms. Atlas came from outside, yes, but more importantly, it came to break the illusion of stability, to show you that the universe is not a closed box but an open system, that origin is not a single point but a process, that belonging is not permanent but provisional. And once you see that, you cannot unsee it. The night sky looks different, the word home feels different, the very idea of where bends under the weight of motion. Atlas did not only cross space, it crossed your assumptions, it shattered the quiet architecture of your intuition. And now, standing in the wake of that breakage, you are left with a choice. Do you cling to the old picture, neat and closed, or do you lean into the openness, into the mess, into the infinite restlessness of the cosmos? That is where part 6 leaves you, not with closure but with a crack wide open. Because now it is time to build again, to take the fragments of intuition left behind and stack the evidence, patiently, carefully, until a new picture begins to emerge. But before we build, you breathe, slowly. letting the broken paces settle, letting the silence hold you. 3i Atlas came from outside, from motion, from scattering, from the universe's refusal to stay still. And so do you. You've sat with the unease, you've felt your intuitions crack, you've let go of the illusion of a neat origin. Now it is time to build again, slowly, carefully, on evidence. Because while 3i Atlas broke apart before it could tell its full story, it still left behind enough for us to measure. And those measurements, faint though they were, are more than just numbers. They are the scaffolding of truth. Start with its path. Astronomers tracked Atlas as it swept across the sky, noting its position night after night, marking how it shifted against the background stars. With enough points, they fit an orbit, and the orbit revealed the first unmistakable clue. Atlas was on a hyperbolic trajectory. Most comets and asteroids in our solar system trace ellipses, some wide, some narrow, some looping far out into the darkness before curling back toward the sun. But they all share one trait: their orbits are closed. They belong. They are tethered to the sun's gravity. Atlas was different. Its orbit did not close. The curve was open, sweeping in from deep space and out again, never to return. Mathematically, its eccentricity was greater than 1. That is the giveaway. Anything with an eccentricity of less than 1 is bound. Exactly 1 is a perfect parabola, the knife's edge between belonging and exile. Greater than 1 means freedom. Greater than 1 means escape. Greater than 1 means interstellar. That single number, the eccentricity, was enough to declare it. Atlas did not come from here. But there was more. Its velocity told the same story. As it approached the sun, it was moving too fast for any local comet. No body born in our solar system could carry that much energy unless something had flung it recently. And there was no evidence of such a fling. The speed was not an accident. It was a signature of origin. This object had fallen into our system with momentum gathered far beyond the reach of our sun. So the orbit and the velocity aligned. Both pointed outward. Both whispered the same truth: this was a traveler. You pause here, because it is worth appreciating how subtle the evidence is. To the eye, Atlas looked no different from any other comet. Faint, icy, glowing softly with a tail. But hidden in the math of its motion was a story that stretched across light years. That is one of the quiet wonders of astronomy. You don't need to touch a thing to know it. You don't need to chase it down or crack it open. Sometimes watching carefully is enough. And yet watching has its limits. Atlas disintegrated before astronomers could capture more detailed data. We did not get the luxury of a long study as we did with Borisov. We did not get the sharp images or the rich spectra that reveal composition. We got fragments, a trail, a faint whisper of dust. Still, even in its breaking, Atlas left traces that added to the evidence stack. When it began to disintegrate, astronomers noted how it broke apart. The pattern of fragmentation suggested a fragile structure, loosely held like a snowball of dust and ice. That fragility itself hinted at its age. Objects that have wandered interstellar space for eons often become fragile, battered by cosmic rays, eroded by micrometeoroids, weakened by endless exposure. In other words, the very fact that Atlas crumbled so easily was itself evidence of its long journey. And there was something else: its timing. Atlas appeared only a year after Borisov, which itself came only 2 years after Oumuamua. To see 3 interstellar objects in such quick succession suggested a pattern, not an accident. It supported the prediction that the galaxy is full of such fragments, and that now, with our telescopes scanning constantly, we will see them more often. A step back for a moment. From orbit, from velocity, from fragility, from timing, each piece of evidence stacks on top of the last. No single piece tells the whole story, but together they build a picture strong enough to hold. Atlas was interstellar. That is not a guess. That is not speculation. That is evidence. And this is where your intuition shifts again, because the mind wants to doubt. The mind wants to say, but what if we are wrong? What if it was just another comet misread? Science anticipates this doubt. That is why astronomers cross-check, test, recalculate. They ran the numbers again and again. They accounted for uncertainties. They checked whether Jupiter or another planet might have perturbed the orbit enough to mimic interstellar motion. But the answer held steady. No local origin could explain the data. It is worth noticing here how fragile evidence can feel. A handful of measurements, a faint streak across the sky, a fragile object that broke apart before it could be studied. And yet from that fragility certainty emerges. That is the paradox of science. It builds strength from fragments, clarity from whispers, truth from silence. And now you find yourself holding this evidence like a stack of stones, each one small, each one imperfect, but together they build a tower tall enough to see over the wall of doubt. Atlas was interstellar, that much is clear. But evidence also invites comparison. To understand Atlas, you look at its siblings, Oumuamua and Borisov. They too carried signatures of exile. Oumuamua with its strange acceleration, Borisov with its unmistakable comet-like activity. Each one different, but each one bearing the same mark. Hyperbolic paths, eccentricities greater than one, velocities too fast to belong. Three voices in chorus, saying the same thing: the galaxy is restless. The fragments are everywhere, and we are only just beginning to see them. You breathe here slowly, letting the evidence settle, because it is not only about numbers, it is about perspective. Each data point widens the lens, stretches the mind, breaks open the comfort of old assumptions. And yet the stack is not finished. There are more pieces to add. Spectra, dust trails, predictions of frequency, comparisons to known comets, models of ejection. Each one another stone, another layer, another reason to believe that 3i Atlas was not an exception but part of a pattern. The pattern itself becomes evidence, and the pattern whispers a truth far larger than any single object. The Milky Way is full of travelers. Pause here again, look up in your imagination at the night sky. Behind every star you see, fragments are drifting. Some will never cross our path, some will pass invisibly, but some, like Atlas, will enter our skies brief and silent before leaving again. The evidence does not just describe the object, it describes the universe, a universe of scattering, of abundance, of endless motion. And if you listen carefully, you hear what the evidence is saying. Not just Atlas came from outside, but also the outside is never far away. That is the gift of evidence. It grounds your imagination in truth. It tells you that the galaxy is not empty, that the visitors are real, that the boundaries of our solar system are more porous than we believed. Atlas came from outside. The numbers say so, the trajectory says so, the fragility says so, the timing says so. And once you see the evidence, you cannot go back to intuition alone. The mind expands, the picture widens, and the night sky grows richer, stranger, more alive. The numbers do not lie. 3i Atlas was interstellar. Its orbit told the story. Its velocity confirmed it. Its fragility added weight. Its timing reinforced the pattern. But science does not stop at one object. It looks sideways, it compares. It builds a case not on one witness but on many. So to understand Atlas, you turn to its siblings, Oumuamua, Borisov. Together the three form a small constellation of evidence. Three voices, each different in tone but all singing the same refrain. These objects do not belong to us. Start with Oumuamua. Discovered in 2017, it was the first interstellar object ever recognized. A faint streak, tumbling end over end, with a shape so strange it seemed unreal, long, thin, cigar-like, or perhaps flattened like a pancake. It showed no visible tail, no cometary activity. And yet its motion betrayed something uncanny. It accelerated ever so slightly in a way gravity alone could not explain. Some invisible force, perhaps jets of gas too faint for our telescopes to catch, was nudging it along. Oumuamua broke intuition in its own way. It looked like no comet we had ever seen. It behaved like no asteroid. It was both and neither, a riddle wrapped in rock and dust. And yet its hyperbolic orbit sealed the case, interstellar. Then came Borisov, discovered in 2019. This one was easier to classify. It looked like a comet with a tail streaming behind it. Spectroscopy revealed its chemistry. Ice is rich in carbon monoxide, more so than most comets in our system. It was exotic, yes, but recognizable. A comet from another star. A cousin to the icy bodies we already knew. And then in 2020 came Atlas, the third voice. Like Borisov, it seemed cometary at first, but before long it fractured, dissolved, became a ghost of dust. Fragile, fleeting, unfinished. Three objects, three travelers, three stories that do not match and yet align. Each one different in character, but each one carrying the same genetic marker. Hyperbolic trajectories, eccentricities greater than one, speeds too high to belong. Each one proof of exile. Together they form a pattern too sharp to ignore. The galaxy is not only filled with fragments, it is filled with diverse fragments, some cometary, some rocky, some stranger still. The Milky Way is not monotone, it is a chorus of variation. And this is where models enter the evidence. Because once you accept that interstellar visitors exist, you can ask, how many, how often, what does their presence imply about the galaxy as a whole? Astronomers build simulations. They take young star systems with their disks of dust and gas, their newborn planets, their restless orbits. They let the math run. They watch as massive planets fling smaller bodies outward. They see how fragments scatter, how orbits destabilize, how the system sheds debris into interstellar space. The results are consistent. Ejection is not rare, it is inevitable. Every star system produces castaways. Every system contributes to the galactic sea of fragments. From this, the statistics emerge. Oumuamua was the first, Borisov the second, Atlas the third, 3 detections in just a few years. Extrapolate from that and you realize there must be billions, perhaps trillions of such objects wandering the Milky Way. Pause here, let that number settle in you. Trillions. The galaxy becomes a crowded place, not just with stars, not just with planets, but with orphans, anonymous travelers drifting without allegiance, carrying with them the fingerprints of other worlds. This abundance breaks another intuition. Because when you picture the galaxy, you imagine the stars as the main characters, the planets as their companions. Everything else is background. But in truth, the fragments may outnumber the stars themselves. Imagine that, more castaways than homes, more wanderers than anchors. It flips the script of the universe. The stable is the exception. The unstable is the rule. Atlas is one piece of evidence in that larger case. But its siblings and the models and the math all point the same direction. The galaxy is filled with travelers. And the fact that we have only just begun to see them says more about our blindness than about their rarity. You lean into this realization because it does something important. It turns what felt like a miracle into an inevitability. You no longer have to ask, how did we get so lucky to see 3 interstellar visitors in such a short time? Instead, you understand this was always happening. We just weren't watching before. There's something deeply humbling about that. The universe did not change for us. We changed. Our instruments sharpened. Our eyes opened. And suddenly what was always true became visible. Evidence is like that. It does not invent reality, it reveals it. So you hold the stack of evidence again, now taller than before. The orbit of Atlas, the speed of Atlas, the fragility of Atlas, the timing of Atlas, the comparisons to Oumuamua and Borisov, the models of ejection, the statistics of frequency, each one a stone, each one imperfect, but together unshakable. And the tower they build points to a horizon far larger than any single object. A horizon where the galaxy is alive with motion. A horizon where fragments carry whispers of other systems. A horizon where origin is not about a single birthplace, but about the universal processes that scatter matter across the stars. And as you let that horizon expand in your mind, you realize this is the real power of evidence. Not that it answers everything, but that it clears the fog just enough for you to glimpse the scale. Atlas was not alone. It was not rare. It was not irrelevant. It was one note in a much larger symphony. And if you are quiet enough, if you let the evidence hum in you, you can almost hear the music of that symphony. A galaxy restless with motion. A galaxy filled with travelers. A galaxy where silence is not emptiness but abundance waiting to be seen. And now, the evidence invites you to go deeper still, to ask not only how often these objects arrive, but what they carry. Not only what they tell us about their journeys, but what they tell us about ourselves. Because every fragment, every traveler, is a piece of a story much larger than our own. And to hear that story, you must be willing to keep stacking, keep comparing, keep listening. The evidence stack grows taller. Orbit, velocity, fragility, timing, comparisons with Oumuamua and Borisov, simulations of ejection, statistics of abundance. But evidence is not only about motion, it is also about substance, about what these travelers are made of, because hidden inside their dust and ice are clues, not just about where they came from, but about what they might bring. And this is where the story sharpens into something more intimate, because it is one thing to imagine rocks drifting through the galaxy, silent and cold. It is another to imagine them carrying chemistry, carrying possibility, carrying the very seeds of life. Start with Borisov. When astronomers turned their instruments toward it, they saw the familiar signs of a comet. A glowing coma, a tail stretching behind it, the faint chemical fingerprint of gases released as ice vaporized in the sun's warmth. But Borisov was not identical to the comets of our system. Its gases carried unusual ratios, especially an abundance of carbon monoxide, far more than most local comets. This hinted at its birthplace, perhaps a colder region around another star where such volatile compounds could survive. Already this told us something profound. Not only do other star systems form comets, they form them differently, with different chemistries, different balances, different stories written in their ices. If Borisov was a messenger, it was a messenger bearing evidence of diversity. The galaxy does not make worlds by one recipe. It experiments, it varies, it creates endlessly. Now return to Atlas. Though it broke apart before detailed study, what little we saw suggested fragility, an ice-rich body prone to disintegration. That too is a kind of chemistry. Fragile objects are often those that formed in colder, more volatile-rich regions. Their very weakness is a clue to their birthplace. And then there is Oumuamua, strange even in its silence. No visible outgassing, no tail, no coma, yet it accelerated slightly as though something invisible was pushing it. Theories abound, hydrogen ice sublimating invisibly, sheets of nitrogen, or perhaps exotic ices unknown to our system. Whatever the cause, Oumuamua told us that interstellar chemistry can surprise us, that we have not yet seen the full range of what the galaxy can make. 3 objects, 3 chemistries, 3 stories, and all of them point to a single conclusion. Stellar fragments are not uniform, they are not generic, they are diverse, carrying the fingerprints of their birthplaces. This is the next layer of evidence, because chemistry is not just detail, chemistry is history. The ratios of gases, the balance of ices, the composition of dust, all are signatures of the environments that forged them. To study an interstellar object is, in a sense, to taste another solar system, to breathe in its air, to sip its water, to touch its dust. Even if only faintly, even if only indirectly, we glimpse the other. And now comes the deeper possibility, the one that stirs the imagination, even as science treads carefully: panspermia. The hypothesis is simple if unsettling. Life, or at least its building blocks, can spread between worlds. Microbes frozen in the protective shell of rock or ice might survive journeys through space. Complex organic molecules might endure the long, cold drift between stars. And when such fragments land on fertile ground, they might spark beginnings. Is there evidence for this? Pieces, yes. We know that organic molecules, the precursors to life, are common in space. Telescopes have detected them in interstellar clouds, in the disks around young stars, in comets within our own system. Amino acids have been found in meteorites that fell to Earth. The chemistry of life does not seem confined to one planet. It seems to emerge naturally, given the right ingredients. We also know that microbes, at least some, are remarkably resilient. Experiments on the International Space Station have shown that certain bacteria can survive years in space, shielded from radiation. Impact simulations suggest that rocks blasted off a planet can carry spores inside them, protected from the violence of launch and the chill of interstellar drift. Put these pieces together and the hypothesis of panspermia no longer sounds like science fiction. It becomes plausible, not proven, not certain, but possible. And if it is possible, then every interstellar fragment takes on new weight. Because it might not only carry dust, it might carry stories of biology. Imagine Atlas in that light, a fragile body drifting for millions of years. Perhaps inside it were organic molecules frozen solid, waiting. Perhaps had it collided with a world instead of dissolving, it might have delivered those molecules into an ocean, a soil, an atmosphere. Perhaps somewhere in the galaxy such a collision has already happened, and life sprouted because of it. The evidence here is circumstantial, yes, but it is compelling enough to keep the thought alive. Because life is the deepest question, the one that hangs over everything. Are we alone? Or is life scattered, seeded, drifting among the stars just as rocks and ices are? If interstellar fragments are abundant, and the evidence says they are, then the odds shift. The silence of the galaxy becomes less about rarity and more about scale. Life may be out there, carried not only by planets but by fragments. Life may be less a local miracle and more a galactic tendency. Pause with that, breathe into it. Because it reshapes the meaning of Atlas's journey. It was not just a fragment of rock and ice. It was a representative of the galaxy's restlessness, a vessel of chemistry, perhaps even a vessel of possibility. And once you see it this way, the evidence stack rises taller still. Not only do interstellar objects exist, not only are they abundant, not only are they diverse, they may also be meaningful. Meaningful because they connect systems. Meaningful because they carry fingerprints of their origins. Meaningful because they may carry seeds. This is not speculation for its own sake. It is the natural extension of the evidence we have. Organic molecules are common. Microbes can survive. Ejection is inevitable. Interstellar travel happens. These truths stacked together form a tower tall enough to glimpse a new horizon. Life itself may not be confined. And suddenly the question, where did Atlas come from, stretches further. It is no longer just about coordinates or chemistry. It is about possibility. It is about whether life itself may be an interstellar traveler, just like the object you watched pass briefly through your sky. You lean into that possibility and it changes the tone of the evidence. It makes it personal. Because if life can spread between worlds, then your own existence may be the product of such a fragment. You may be, in some sense, a descendant of an interstellar traveler, a child not just of Earth but of the galaxy. That thought is not provable, not yet, but it fits the evidence, and it humbles you. Because now you see Atlas not as an outsider but as kin, not as a stranger but as family, not as an exception but as a reminder that life and matter alike are restless, wandering, scattered across the dark. The evidence stack is no longer just numbers and orbits. It is a lens. And through it, you glimpse the possibility that the galaxy itself is alive with more than fragments. And if that is true, then Atlas was not just passing through. It was carrying a message. It's not one you could read in full, but one you could feel. You are not alone. You have never been alone. The evidence has been stacked, piece by piece. First the orbit, then the velocity, then the fragility, the timing, the comparisons to Oumuamua and Borisov, simulations of ejection, statistics of abundance, organics, the plausibility of panspermia. Each fragment of knowledge rests on another, and now the tower stands tall enough to see farther. So what does it show you? What picture emerges when you gather the data, the math, the whispers of dust and motion? It shows you a galaxy alive with travelers. Not rare, not occasional, but abundant. Not identical, but diverse. Not irrelevant, but meaningful. And that picture changes everything. First, abundance. The statistics alone demand it. If we detected 3 interstellar visitors in only a few years, when our surveys are still relatively young, then the unseen population must be vast. Astronomers estimate that for every star in the Milky Way there may be 1 trillion such objects, 1 trillion silent messengers wandering between suns. Imagine that scale. The night sky you see is not only filled with stars. Between those stars, drifting invisibly, are more objects than you can fathom. Not glowing, not obvious, but present, some smaller than mountains, some the size of planets, some carrying ice, some carrying rock. The galaxy is not empty space, it is a storm of fragments, a slow storm spread over eons, but a storm nonetheless. Second, diversity. The three we've seen already prove it. Oumuamua, strange and silent, Borisov, familiar and cometary, Atlas, fragile and fleeting. 3 objects, 3 chemistries, 3 stories. And simulations agree. Different star systems produce different debris. Young stars fling out icy bodies. Old systems eject rocky fragments. Worlds collide and shatter, leaving shards that wander forever. This diversity is crucial. It means every interstellar visitor is a sample, a chance to study another system without leaving home, a chance to see how the galaxy builds worlds not in theory but in substance. Each one carries the fingerprints of its birthplace. Each one is a bottled message, a sample return mission sent not by us but by the universe itself. Third, chemistry. Borisov's gases, Oumuamua's strange acceleration, Atlas's fragility, each hinting at the chemistry of their origins. And beyond them, meteorites here on Earth, pieces of local comets and asteroids, have already shown that space is rich with organics, amino acids, nucleobases, the raw materials of life. If they are common here, why not elsewhere? If comets in our system are chemical libraries, why wouldn't interstellar comets carry their own volumes? The evidence suggests the galaxy is chemically fertile. Life's building blocks are not confined. They are scattered widely, waiting for the right conditions to take root. Fourth, biology. Here the evidence is thinner, more speculative, but still compelling. Microbes can survive radiation, cold, vacuum, at least for a time. Organic molecules endure far longer. Rocks blasted from planets can carry protective interiors. Interstellar drift is slow, yes, but time is abundant. Millions of years, billions of years, enough for fragments to cross between stars. Put it together and panspermia shifts from wild idea to plausible mechanism. Not proven but possible. And if possible, then the question of life's origin becomes far more open. Maybe it began here on Earth, or maybe it arrived, delivered by a traveler not unlike Atlas. If so, then you yourself are evidence. Your body, your mind, your breath, all proof that interstellar travelers can seed more than dust. They can seed futures. And so the evidence stack, tall and complete, points you toward a vision of the galaxy. A place where star systems are not closed boxes, but open workshops. A place where fragments are constantly exchanged. A place where chemistry flows, where organics spread, where life might travel unseen. A place not of isolation, but of connection. This vision is not fantasy. It is not intuition alone. It is built from data, from the orbit of Atlas, from the chemistry of Borisov, from the strangeness of Oumuamua, from the math of simulation, from the resilience of microbes, from the abundance of organic molecules. It is science, but science that opens into wonder. A pause here. Look at the tower of evidence again. See how it rises from fragments. See how it lanes imperfect but sturdy. See how it lets you glimpse a larger truth. And notice what has happened. The question, where did 3i Atlas come from, has not been erased. It has been expanded. At first you wanted a coordinate, a star, a name. Now you see something larger. Atlas came from the galaxy itself, from the universal process of scattering, of exchange, of motion. Its birthplace may be lost, but its meaning is not. And here is the final piece of evidence, perspective. Because evidence is not only about measurement, it is about how those measurements shift your view, about how they stretch the boundaries of what you thought was possible. When you stack the evidence high enough, the question of origin becomes not a point, but a panorama. not a map but a horizon. So where did Atlas come from? It came from the restlessness of stars. It came from the collisions of worlds. It came from the inevitability of ejection. It came from the galaxy's abundance. It came from the chemistry that saturates space. It came from the possibility that life itself is not confined. It came from all of this, and it came here briefly to remind you of it. Now you sit with the evidence, steady and tall, and you realize the story is shifting again, because evidence is not the end. Evidence is the middle, the scaffolding on which the larger structure is built. What comes next is not more data, but a counterweight, the counter case. The doubts, the critiques, the alternative explanations that sharpen the truth by pressing against it. Because science is not built on belief, it is built on challenge. So before the story can move toward synthesis, it must bend into resistance. It must walk through the counter case. But for now, you let the evidence stand in your mind like a tower, glowing faintly against the night. A tower built of fragments pointing outward, pointing not to a single star, but to the galaxy itself. The evidence stack looks tall, it looks steady. Orbit, velocity, chemistry, abundance, each piece layered carefully on the last. But here is the uncomfortable truth. No tower is beyond question. Science at its best does not worship evidence. It tests it, it pokes at it. It tries to knock it down to see what still stands after the shaking. So let us step into the counter case. Let us ask, what if we are wrong? Start with the orbit. Yes, Atlas traced a hyperbolic path. Yes, its eccentricity was greater than 1. But could that not have been an illusion? Could perturbations from planets or subtle pushes from outgassing or simple errors in measurement have tricked us into thinking it came from outside? The history of astronomy is full of mistakes. Comets once thought interstellar, later revealed to be local. Orbits miscalculated, brightness misinterpreted, instruments fooled by their own limits. So what if Atlas was not a visitor at all, but simply one of our own? An Oort cloud comet perturbed into a hyperbolic orbit by Jupiter or Neptune. Astronomers considered this. They recalculated again and again. They accounted for planetary perturbations. They adjusted for non-gravitational forces like outgassing. And still the orbit held, hyperbolic, open, unmistakably interstellar. But the doubt lingers, because you know that science is a story of refinement. Measurements improve, models evolve. Today's certainty is tomorrow's correction. Could Atlas be reclassified someday? Could its interstellar identity dissolve with sharper data? Perhaps the countercase does not close the door, it leaves it cracked open. Then there is the matter of fragility. The fact that Atlas broke apart was used as evidence for its age, its long journey. But is that necessarily true? Many local comets born here crumble as they approach the sun. Fragility is not unique to travelers, it is universal. So perhaps Atlas's disintegration tells us nothing about distance or time. Perhaps it was simply unlucky, or unusually weak, or just one more fragile snowball among countless fragile snowballs. And if fragility is not proof, then one of the stones in the evidence tower loosens. Now consider chemistry. We did not capture detailed spectra of Atlas before it broke. We do not know its precise composition. The hints we have are faint, incomplete, fragmentary. Unlike Borisov, which gave us a clear signature of unusual chemistry, Atlas left us mostly silence. So how can we claim it carried the fingerprints of another star system? How can we speak of diversity when, in this case, the sample dissolved before we could read it? Perhaps we are projecting too much onto it. Perhaps Atlas was not a messenger of difference, but a ghost that told us nothing at all. And then comes the most difficult counter case of all, meaning. We layered possibility upon possibility until Atlas seemed almost mythic, an emissary of organics, a vessel of seeds, a fragment carrying the whisper of panspermia. But where is the hard evidence for that? We have no sample, no direct measurement, no proof that Atlas carried anything more than dust. The leap from cometary ice to life-bearing fragment is wide, some would say too wide. So what if Atlas was nothing more than what it appeared to be? A fragile, icy body doomed to break apart, carrying no secrets, no biology, no message. This is the sharpest blade of the counter case, that we are the ones filling the silence with meaning. That Atlas did not carry stories, we wrote them onto it. That the universe is not whispering to us through visitors, but that we are whispering to ourselves, using fragments as mirrors for our own longing. This doubt cuts deep, because it questions not only Atlas, but the very act of interpretation. Why do we look at a crumbling body of ice and rock and see kinship? Why do we hear echoes of life in chemical ratios? Why do we imagine seeds drifting between stars? Perhaps because we need to. Perhaps because we cannot tolerate silence. Perhaps because the human mind, when faced with an object from outside, must make it speak, even if the object itself says nothing. So what if Atlas was simply mute? What if it told us nothing and we invented everything? This countercase grows heavy. You feel it pressing on the tower of evidence, leaning against it, testing its weight. And you realize much of the story we told rests on absence. The absence of a closed orbit. The absence of a return path. The absence of familiar chemistry. The absence of permanence. Absence is powerful but fragile. It can be overturned by a single correction, a single new observation. And so the tower wavers, not toppling but bending. Yet this is not failure. This is the rhythm of science. Evidence stacked, countercase applied, tension built. What survives the shaking is stronger than what came before. So let us linger here in the countercase before moving on. Let us sit with the possibility that Atlas was not as special as we imagine, that it was fragile in the ordinary way, cometary in the ordinary way, silent in the ordinary way. Let us admit the possibility that its story is not extraordinary, but banal, because in that admission lies the sharpest kind of humility. The humility to accept that sometimes visitors are only visitors, that not every fragment carries a secret, that not every question has an answer. And yet, notice what happens as you sit in this humility. The silence does not erase the awe, the doubt does not erase the wonder. If anything, they sharpen it. Because even if Atlas carried nothing more than dust, it still came from beyond. Even if it whispered no secrets, it still crossed the gulf. Even if it was ordinary in an extraordinary context, a fragment of another star system passing through ours. So perhaps the countercase does not tear down the tower completely. Perhaps it simply reminds you that the tower is provisional, that every answer is temporary, that every certainty must be tested. And in that reminder, the countercase gives you something unexpected: trust. Not blind trust in any single explanation, but trust in the process itself. The process of building, doubting, refining. The process by which science slowly turns silence into understanding. So where does this leave you? With a question still open. With a tower still standing, though bent by doubt. With a visitor still mysterious, though not meaningless. Atlas remains what it always was: fragile, fleeting, uncertain. And perhaps that is enough. Perhaps its lesson is not in what it revealed, but in what it refused to reveal. Because meaning is not only in certainty. Meaning is also in tension, in contradiction, in the space between evidence and doubt. And Atlas, in its brief passage, gave us all of that. There is a temptation to believe that the discovery of 3 interstellar objects means we now know something about them, that the category is real, established, solid. But pause here, step back, admit the possibility that this, too, is fragile, that our entire understanding of interstellar visitors is still provisional, 3 dots on a map from which we try to sketch the outline of a continent. Start with perspective. The galaxy is vast, 100,000 light-years across, hundreds of billions of stars, trillions of planets, a sea of dust, gas, radiation, motion. And against this immensity, what do we have? 3 objects, 3 brief glimpses. Oumuamua in 2017, Borisov in 2019, Atlas in 2020. 3 data points. If you tried to understand the oceans of Earth by watching 3 waves crash against a shore, how much would you really know? If you tried to describe an entire forest from 3 fallen leaves, how accurate would your description be? That is the scale of our ignorance. Now think about tools. Our telescopes are sharp, yes, sharper than ever before. Automated surveys scan the skies nightly, flagging faint streaks of motion. Algorithms calculate orbits, classify bodies, alert astronomers worldwide. And yet these tools are only just beginning to scrape the surface. We are limited by faintness, by timing, by angle, by the brief windows in which objects are visible. Oumuamua was gone before we could even turn our best instruments on it. Borisov gave us more, but still only in passing. Atlas crumbled before a full study could be made. 3 objects and none of them studied in full detail. No samples, no close flybys, no missions, only glimpses incomplete and imperfect. What we call knowledge of interstellar objects is, in truth, the faintest beginning. Then consider categories. We call them interstellar because their orbits appear hyperbolic, because their velocities suggest origin beyond the sun's gravity, because their chemistry seems unusual. But categories in science are not eternal. They are scaffolds built to hold what little data we have. Tomorrow, the scaffold may be torn down and rebuilt. Perhaps interstellar object will fracture into subcategories. Interstellar comet, interstellar asteroid, interstellar fragment. Perhaps we will discover objects that blur the line further, rogue planets, drifting debris clouds, bodies captured and then released. Or perhaps we will discover that some objects we thought were interstellar were not, that errors bent our classifications. Perhaps the category itself is too blunt to capture the diversity of reality. We forget sometimes that science is not only about answers, it is about making categories and then breaking them when they no longer serve. What if interstellar object is just the first, crude name we've given to a family of phenomena we don't yet understand? And then interstellar space itself. What do we truly know of the medium these travelers cross? We imagine the void between stars as empty, but it is not. It is filled with plasma, with dust, with faint magnetic fields, with radiation. It is shaped by galactic tides, by passing stars, by drifting clouds of gas. Do we know how such environments shape objects over millions of years? Do we know how ice sublimates in deep interstellar cold? How radiation fractures molecules? How collisions with dust chip away at surfaces? The answer is not really. We model, we speculate, but we do not yet have direct samples of a body proven to have wandered interstellar space for eons. We do not know firsthand what such an object looks like after its long exile. So when we look at Atlas and it crumbles, we interpret fragility as evidence of a long journey. But is that certain? Could fragility not also emerge from youth, from local composition, from ordinary cometary weakness? Our ignorance of interstellar conditions makes every conclusion provisional. The counter case then is not just about Atlas, it is about us. It is about the fragility of knowledge built on so little. It is about the risk of overinterpreting 3 data points. It is about the humility to admit how small our understanding is compared to the scale of the galaxy. We are like children who have picked up 3 stones from a beach and now speak of the geology of the entire Earth. Our stones are real, our descriptions may even contain truth, but the enormity of what we do not yet know dwarfs what we do. And this raises another doubt, expectation. The narrative we built, that the galaxy is full of travelers, that abundance is the rule, that seeds of life might drift everywhere, rests on extrapolation. From 3 objects we built a universe of trillions. From 3 chemistries we imagined endless diversity. From 3 trajectories we inferred inevitability. But what if our extrapolation is wrong? What if interstellar objects are rarer than we think? What if the 3 we saw were anomalies, accidents, outliers? What if abundance is the exception, not the rule? Statistics drawn from small numbers are fragile. They invite overconfidence. They whisper patterns where there may be none. So perhaps the galaxy is not crowded with travelers. Perhaps Atlas was truly rare. Perhaps its arrival was not inevitable but extraordinary. And if that is the case, then our story bends again. The meaning of Atlas would not be in its ordinariness, but in its rarity. Not in its role as one among trillions, but as a singular, precious anomaly. The counter case does not end here. There are voices that go further still. Voices that suggest that even calling Oumuamua, Borisov, and Atlas objects may be too simple. That perhaps what we saw were not coherent bodies, but transient clouds, fragments, processes we do not yet understand. That our telescopes caught only shadows, and we mistook those shadows for solid things. If so, then what we call interstellar visitors may be less like travelers and more like weather. Temporary formations, dissolving as quickly as they appear. Not bodies crossing the galaxy, but phenomena flickering into view. It sounds extreme, but extremity is part of the counter case too. It stretches imagination not to confirm but to test. So where does this leave you? The evidence stack built a tower, the counter case has shaken it. Some stones remain solid, some wobble, some fall. And what emerges is a picture less certain, less grand, but also more honest. We have seen 3 objects. We are not entirely sure what they were. We have named them interstellar, but our confidence rests on thin ground. This is not despair, this is humility. This is the reminder that science at its edge is not knowledge but questioning, not certainty but curiosity sharpened by doubt. So you sit with Atlas again, fragile, fleeting, brief, not as a messenger, not as a myth, not as a certainty, but as a question. Perhaps that is its truest meaning, not the answers it gave, but the humility it forced. The reminder that the universe is larger, stranger, less knowable than you want it to be. And in that reminder, Atlas still fulfills its role. Not as a teacher of facts, but as a teacher of perspective. You began with a question: where did 3i Atlas come from? At first it seemed straightforward, a star system, a birthplace, a coordinate waiting to be found. But now, after walking through evidence and doubt, you find yourself facing a more radical possibility. What if the question itself is flawed? What if origin is not a property of the universe, but of us? Think about time. Humans divide time into beginnings and endings. Birthdays, anniversaries, histories. We need origins because they give shape to stories. Without a starting point, a narrative feels incomplete. But the universe is not a narrative. The universe does not care for beginnings. Stars form from collapsing clouds of dust, but those clouds came from older stars exploding, which themselves were born from still earlier processes. Where is the origin in that chain? Every beginning is only another ending stretched backward. Atlas too resists a single origin. Was its beginning the moment it was ejected from its star system? The moment the planet that threw it formed? The moment its atoms fused inside an ancient star? The moment those atoms themselves emerged from the Big Bang? Trace it far enough and origin dissolves into process. So when you ask where did it come from, perhaps the universe answers only, from change. Think about place. You want Atlas to have a home, a single star system to point toward, a birthplace to pin on a map. But what does place mean for an object that has traveled for millions of years, wandering through regions shaped by different tides, different forces, different encounters? Is its origin the place where it began, or the path it traveled? Is it the star it once circled, or the galaxy it now drifts within? Even on Earth, place is slippery. Where are you from? The city where you were born, the house where you grew up, the culture that shaped you, the stardust that built your body. Atlas carries the same ambiguity. Its home is not one system, but many. Its path is not one trajectory, but countless small nudges, each shaping its exile. So when you ask where it came from, perhaps the truer answer is everywhere it passed. Think about identity. We cling to origins because they anchor identity. You believe you know yourself better if you know where you were born, who your ancestors were, what soil your roots touched. But is that really identity, or only one layer of it? If Atlas had no fixed home, does that make it less real? If it had no single origin, does that make it meaningless? Of course not. Its identity is in motion, in travel, in impermanence. It is not defined by where it started, but by the fact that it wandered. Perhaps the same is true of you. Your identity is not locked in a birthplace or a single story. It is in the fact that you too move, change, transform. In this light, Atlas is not a puzzle of origin, but a mirror of existence. The counter case grows sharper still. What if origin is not only flawed but irrelevant? What if the universe does not deal in origins at all, only in transformation? Think of rivers. Where does a river come from? The spring at its head, the rain that fed the spring, the clouds that formed the rain, the ocean that evaporated to make the clouds. Where do you draw the line? Every origin is simply another stage in a cycle. Think of fire. Where does a flame come from? The spark that lit it, the match that struck the spark, the tree that made the match, the sunlight that grew the tree. So too with Atlas. Where it came from is not a point, but a chain without end. And if the chain has no end, then perhaps the very concept of origin is meaningless. The philosophical blade cuts deepest here. Humans long for causes. We want roots, beginnings, first moments. But maybe the universe is not causal in the way we imagine. Maybe it is emergent. Maybe things arise not from singular points, but from networks, from interactions, from processes that cannot be reduced to one source. Atlas may not have an origin because nothing does. Not stars, not planets, not people, not life. Everything comes from everything else. This is the most unsettling counter case of all. Not that Atlas was misclassified. Not that it was local instead of interstellar. Not that it was meaningless dust. But that your question itself, where did it come from, is the illusion. Because coming from is a human frame, not a cosmic truth. The universe is not a story with beginnings and endings. It is a continuum, a flow, a restless unfolding with no single starting point. So where does this leave you? Perhaps in silence, because if origin dissolves, then the question dissolves with it. Atlas does not need a birthplace to be real. It does not need an origin to matter. It simply is. And maybe that is the deepest humility the counter case offers, to let go of the need for answers framed in human terms, to accept that the universe is not obliged to conform to our categories, to sit quietly with what is without forcing it into where and when and from. Yet notice what happens in this silence. It does not diminish wonder, it deepens it. Because once you let go of the illusion of neat origins, you are left with something even larger. A universe where everything is connected, everything is continuous, everything is part of the same restless process. Atlas in this light is not a fragment from another place. It is a fragment of this galaxy, this flow, this endless scattering. And so are you. This is the counter case at its fullest. Not just doubt of data, not just skepticism of classification, but the dismantling of the question itself. Where did Atlas come from? Perhaps nowhere. Perhaps everywhere. Perhaps the question itself is misplaced. And here, at the edge of doubt, the story prepares to shift again. Because after the breaking, after the skepticism, after the dismantling of even the question itself, you will need to build anew. Not with naive certainty, not with illusions of neat origins, but with a deeper synthesis. One that holds both evidence and doubt, both presence and absence, both meaning and humility. That comes next. But for now, you sit at the very bottom of the question, the place where it dissolves. And in the dissolving, you feel something unexpected, peace. Because not all questions must resolve. Some must simply open. The counter case has done its work. It has bent the tower of evidence. It has loosened stones. It has reminded you of humility. And now, in the quiet after doubt, you are left with fragments. Fragments of certainty, the orbit, the speed, the hyperbolic path. Fragments of skepticism, the fragility, the small data set, the limits of our tools. Fragments of philosophy, the possibility that origin itself is an illusion. So what now? What do you build when both evidence and doubt are real? You begin with synthesis, not choosing one side over the other, but weaving them together into a larger truth. Start with the paradox of knowledge. Atlas was interstellar, yes, but our knowledge of it is fragile, incomplete. It carried chemistry, perhaps even organics, perhaps even the seeds of life, but it also broke apart before we could know for sure. It was meaningful, yes, but also silent, refusing to reveal itself fully. So what does that mean? It means that knowledge at the edges is always paradoxical. You know enough to glimpse, you do not know enough to resolve. And perhaps that is the lesson. Interstellar objects are not neat answers, but mirrors of the way science itself works. Half light, half shadow, enough to see, never enough to close. Next, the paradox of rarity and abundance. The evidence suggests interstellar objects are abundant, trillions in the galaxy, flowing constantly between stars. But the counter case reminds you that we have seen only 3, and perhaps our extrapolations overreach. So which is true, abundant or rare? The synthesis answer both. They are abundant in the galaxy, but rare in perception, abundant in theory, rare in direct observation. The cosmos is thick with travelers, but your eyes are only just beginning to catch them. Think of rain, millions of drops fall, but through a narrow crack in the roof only a few are seen. The rain is abundant, your view is limited. So it is with Atlas. Its presence does not mean rarity or miracle. Its detection means our roof just cracked open wide enough to let the drops through. Now the paradox of fragility and endurance. Atlas crumbled, its body dissolved. Its story ended almost before it began. And yet its very presence here meant it had endured millions of years in interstellar space, surviving radiation, collisions, endless cold. So was it fragile or strong? Again, the answer is both. Fragile in the short span of its final act, strong across the immense journey that carried it to us. Perhaps fragility and endurance are not opposites at all. Perhaps they are scales of time. Across moments all things break. Across eons even fragile things persist. Atlas embodies that paradox, and so do you. Then comes the paradox of origin. You asked where it came from. The evidence suggested another star system. The countercase dissolved the very concept of origin. So what is the synthesis? Origin is real but not singular, it is layered. Atlas came from another star, yes, but also from a galaxy restless with scattering, from atoms forged in older stars, from processes that stretch back to the Big Bang. Origin is not a point but a tapestry, not one coordinate but many woven together. The mistake was not in asking the question, but in expecting a simple answer. Now the paradox of meaning. Was Atlas meaningful? Evidence says yes. It revealed abundance, diversity, possibility. Countercase says no. Perhaps it was nothing more than dust, and we wrote meaning onto it. So which is true? Both. Meaning is not inherent. Meaning is made. Atlas may not have carried a message, but by encountering it, by asking, by wondering, we made it meaningful. The universe may not whisper, but we can listen anyway. And in the act of listening, we transform silence into significance. Meaning is not discovered. It is created between what is seen and the mind that sees it. A synthesis is not compromise. It is not splitting the difference. It is holding paradox until it expands into a wider truth. Atlas was evidence and doubt, fragile and enduring, rare and abundant, meaningful and mute, rooted in origin and free of it. It was all of these and none alone. This way of seeing shifts something in you, because you realize that Atlas's story is not just about astronomy. It is about existence. You too are built of fragments of knowledge and doubt. You too are rare and abundant, fragile and enduring. You too come from many origins, none singular, all layered. You too are meaningful and mute, depending on how you are seen. Atlas is not only an interstellar object, it is a metaphor for being itself. A pause here. Let the paradoxes settle in you, not as contradictions, but as companions, because this is how the universe speaks, not in neat answers, but in paradoxes that demand a wider mind. And yet, synthesis is not only philosophical, it is scientific too. For the future is coming, and with it, new evidence. Surveys will grow sharper, telescopes will grow wider, we will see more interstellar visitors, perhaps dozens, perhaps hundreds, each one adding to the stack, each one testing the counter case, each one expanding the synthesis. Missions may even fly to them, spacecraft designed to chase, to sample, to hold fragments in human hands. Then chemistry will no longer be speculation. Then origin will be traced more sharply. Then meaning will be drawn not only from absence but from substance. And when that day comes, the paradoxes will remain. Because no matter how much we know, the question of where will always dissolve into larger scales, larger times, larger processes. So where does this leave you now in the quiet of the night? With a synthesis, fragile but wide. Atlas was a traveler, real though fleeting. It came from beyond, though beyond has no single point. It was fragile in the end, but strong in the journey. It was rare in sight, but abundant in truth. It was mute, yet meaningful. It was all of these at once. And in holding all of them, you glimpse something of the universe itself. Not tidy, not neat, not closed, but paradoxical, expansive, endless. The counter case taught humility. The evidence taught wonder. The synthesis teaches both at once. And as you sit with this, you feel the story preparing to shift again. Because synthesis is not the end either. It is a platform, a place to stand before stepping into the open loops of possibility. But not yet. For now, you stay with Atlas, one last time in the fullness of synthesis. It came, it broke, it left. And yet it remains, in your mind, in your questions, in the paradoxes it opened. A fragment, fragile and eternal, fleeting and infinite. A visitor and a mirror. The paradox of Atlas still lingers in you. Fragile yet enduring, rare yet abundant, mute yet meaningful. Not an answer, but a widening of the frame. And once the frame widens, it is difficult to put it back. Because if Atlas teaches anything, it is that the galaxy itself must be reimagined. The old picture was simple. A galaxy filled with stars, each star with its planets, each system a closed family circling self-contained, space between them empty, silent, a backdrop. That picture is neat, it is intuitive, but it is also false. The new picture is restless. Stars form, and in their birth they scatter fragments. Planets collide, and in their collisions they scatter fragments. Systems shift, and in their instability they scatter fragments. The galaxy is not a collection of islands. It is an ocean of exchange, matter flowing between systems, seeds drifting endlessly, a slow circulation across tens of thousands of light years. Atlas was not an exception to this picture, it was the proof of it, a single drop of water caught mid-current. Think of the Milky Way as a forest. At first you imagine each tree standing alone, roots here, trunk here, branches here. But look closer and you see connections everywhere. Roots tangled underground, spores drifting through the air, seeds carried by birds, fungi linking trees into networks. So too with stars. Each star looks solitary, but beneath the surface connections run deep. Fragments link them, dust links them, radiation links them, gravity links them. Atlas was a spore, a seed. A proof that the galaxy is not a collection of solitary trees but a forest in constant exchange. Synthesis, then, is not only about Atlas, it is about scale. When you widen the frame far enough, the galaxy itself becomes the object. Atlas is not the question but the clue. Where did it come from? From everywhere. What does it mean? That the Milky Way is not still but dynamic. What does it show? That systems are not isolated but porous. Porous to dust, porous to fragments, perhaps even porous to life. And this is where synthesis grows daring, because if fragments like Atlas drift freely, if they are abundant, diverse, seeded with chemistry, Then what about life? The counter case reminded you not to leap, not to see life in every grain of dust. But the synthesis does not leap blindly. It builds carefully from what is known. Life requires chemistry. Chemistry is common. Life requires time. Time is abundant. Life requires places to grow. Planets are plentiful. And fragments like Atlas are the threads weaving these conditions together, moving chemistry from star to star, carrying possibility across the void. So perhaps life is not local. Perhaps it is woven through the galaxy itself, in ways we have only just begun to imagine. A pause here. This is not proof, this is not certainty, but it is possibility grounded in synthesis. And sometimes possibility is enough to widen imagination, enough to soften the sharp edge of solitude, enough to remind you that life like Atlas may not be confined to one place, one origin, one story. The synthesis also changes how you see time. Before, you thought of Atlas as fleeting, here and gone. Now you see it as part of a process unfolding across millions, even billions of years. Its brief passage through our skies was one chapter in a much larger book, a book written not in sentences, but in orbits and collisions and scatterings. If Atlas was fragile in the moment, it was enduring across eons. If we were too late to study it closely, the galaxy will not run out of pages. More travelers will come. More chapters will be written. Time is not scarcity, time is abundance, and the synthesis changes how you see yourself. Because in widening the frame, you cannot help but notice that you too are a fragment. You too were scattered by forces beyond your choosing. You too are fragile in the moment, yet enduring across generations. You too carry chemistry older than Earth itself, written in atoms born in long-dead stars. You are not separate from Atlas, you are parallel to it. Both of you are travelers. Both of you are questions without neat origins. Both of you are processes unfolding. Atlas came from elsewhere, so did you. This is the quiet power of synthesis. It does not erase the counter case. It does not silence the evidence. It holds both. Yes, Atlas was fragile. Yes, our data was incomplete. Yes, our categories are provisional. But also, Atlas was real. Atlas was interstellar. Atlas was a proof of a larger truth. Evidence and doubt are not enemies, they are partners. And when you hold them together, you glimpse the galaxy more fully than either alone can show you. So what is the synthesis, spoken plainly? That interstellar objects are abundant, though rarely seen. That their chemistries are diverse, though fragile to measure. That their orbits reveal exile, though with uncertainty. That they carry possibility, though not certainty. That their meaning is not in what they are, but in how they widen the frame. And Atlas specifically, it was a fragment of that wider truth, a single thread in the restless weaving of the Milky Way. Not an anomaly, not an accident, not a myth, but a reminder. The galaxy is not a quiet museum of stars. It is a restless workshop of matter, a forest of exchange, a storm of fragments. Atlas was one droplet in that storm, one spore in that forest, one traveler in that workshop. And though it broke apart before we could know it fully, it did not need to survive to carry its lesson. Its very presence was enough. The synthesis does not end here, it has further to go. Because every vision that widens also unsettles. Every horizon that expands also opens new questions. But for now, you pause at this stage of the journey. You sit with Atlas not as puzzle, not as answer, but as mirror. It came, it broke, it left, and in doing so, it showed you not only something about the galaxy, but something about yourself. That origins are layered, that fragility and endurance coexist, that rarity and abundance are scales of perception, that meaning is not inherent but created, that you too are a traveler. Synthesis does not settle, it expands. You thought you were asking a simple question, where did Atlas come from? But each answer only opened more. Each thread pulled revealed not one origin but many, not one meaning but a constellation of paradoxes. And now, in the wake of evidence and counter-case, you sit with the wider truth. Atlas was not only about astronomy, it was about impermanence, it was about identity, it was about what it means to exist at all. First, Atlas broke apart, that much is undeniable. It crumbled under the heat of the sun, dissolved into dust, faded into silence. You might be tempted to see that as failure, as tragedy, as the loss of what could have been. But consider the longer frame. Atlas had already endured for millions of years. It had drifted through the galaxy, across distances we can hardly imagine, surviving cosmic rays, collisions, the slow eroding cold of interstellar space. Its breaking was not failure. Its breaking was the final act of endurance. Endurance is not the opposite of persistence. It is its completion. All things endure until they don't. All things last until they change. Impermanence is not destruction. Impermanence is transformation. Atlas did not vanish. Its fragments remain dispersed across space, part of the dust that may one day become new worlds. Its journey did not end in nothingness. It ended in scattering. And scattering, as you have seen, is the universe's way. Now, identity. Atlas challenges the way you think about identity because it resists simple labels. Was it a comet? Yes. Was it interstellar? Yes. Was it fragile? Yes. Was it enduring? Yes. But it was also more. It was motion. It was paradox. It was change. Human intuition longs for fixed identity. You want to pin things down. This is what it is. This is what it means. But Atlas reminds you that identity is fluid. You two are not one thing. You are not fixed in place. You are not bound to a single story. You are a collection of influences, origins, processes. You are fragile and enduring, rare and abundant, mute and meaningful, all at once. Atlas dissolves not only in space, but in you. It dissolves the illusion that identity must be singular. It shows you that identity can be layered, shifting, paradoxical. And then, continuity. This is perhaps the most profound synthesis. Because once you accept impermanence and fluid identity, you see continuity in a new light. Atlas broke apart, its fragments scattered, but those fragments are not lost, they are not nothing, they are still here, drifting, colliding, becoming. Continuity is not permanence. Continuity is transformation across scales. And continuity applies not only to Atlas, but to life. The atoms in your body were forged in stars. The molecules that compose you were once part of dust clouds, comets, oceans, soils. You are a continuation of countless processes. You are not isolated. You are not singular. You are the latest form taken by matter that has wandered across billions of years. Atlas in this light is kin. Its scattering mirrors your own. Its impermanence mirrors your own. Its continuity mirrors your own. You are both fragments in motion, both threads in a tapestry too vast to see in full. Pause here. Let impermanence, identity, and continuity settle in you, not as abstractions but as lived truths. Because they are not only about Atlas, they are about you. The galaxy reframed again. Atlas shows that the galaxy is not a static stage of stars and planets. It is a living system of exchange, scattering, circulation. And within that system, impermanence is the rule, identity is fluid, and continuity is unbroken. Stars die and their dust becomes new stars. Planets collide and their fragments become travelers. Objects wander and their chemistry seeds new places. Even life perhaps follows the same rhythm, not confined but continuous, not permanent but scattered, not isolated but shared. The galaxy is not a museum, it is a metabolism. Atlas was one pulse in that metabolism, and so are you. The personal synthesis. What does this mean for you here now? It means that impermanence is not to be feared. Atlas shows that fragility is not failure, breaking is not the end, it is simply the next stage of continuity. It means that identity is not to be held too tightly. Atlas shows that a thing can be many things at once, that labels are temporary, that meaning is layered. It means that connection is deeper than you imagine. Atlas shows that even a fragment wandering for millions of years is still part of a whole, that nothing is ever truly lost, that continuity flows through everything. These are not just cosmic lessons, they are human ones. Your life too is impermanent. Your identity too is fluid. Your continuity, too, is unbroken. You, too, are Atlas. Synthesis is the widening of the mirror. At first, you thought you were studying an object, a comet, a fragment from another star. Now, you see that you are studying yourself. Atlas is not only about astronomy, it is about existence, about how to live in a universe that is restless, impermanent, paradoxical. It is about letting go of the illusion of permanence. It is about embracing the fluidity of identity. It is about trusting continuity even when forms dissolve. And as you sit with this, you feel something shift. Not fear, not despair, but calm. Because the truth Atlas reveals is not bleak, it is vast. To be impermanent is not to be meaningless. To be scattered is not to be lost. To be fluid is not to be empty. It is to be part of the same continuity that binds stars, planets, segments, and life. So the question, where did Atlas come from, has carried you far. From evidence to doubt to paradox to synthesis. And the answer at last is not a coordinate, not a star, not a system. It is this: Atlas came from impermanence, from fluid identity, from continuity. And so did you. Synthesis does not stop with you. It begins with the self, yes, with impermanence, with fluid identity, with continuity, but it does not end there. It widens again, stretching outward into the shared, the collective, the future. Because Atlas was not only your mirror, it was ours. A fragment seen not by one but by many, studied not by one telescope but by a network across Earth, interpreted not by one mind but by a chorus of voices, scientists, dreamers, skeptics, poets. Its story is not singular, it is communal. First, the collective seeing. Think of it, a faint streak of light in 2020, captured by the Atlas survey, automated, robotic, eyes scanning the sky tirelessly. Then alerts sent to other observatories, astronomers turning their instruments, data shared across the globe. No one person discovered Atlas in the full sense. Its discovery was distributed, a product of shared tools, shared labor, shared curiosity. This is what synthesis means at the collective level. No single gaze is enough. Only together, across continents, across disciplines, across perspectives, can we catch a glimpse of what drifts through the dark. Atlas was fragile, but the act of noticing it was strong. A net cast not by one hand but by many. Second, the collective questioning. Atlas provoked not only answers but debates. Was it truly interstellar? What did its fragility mean? What did its path reveal? What did its chemistry suggest? Some said it was a messenger. Others said it was nothing. Some saw meaning. Others saw illusion. And in that debate you see the pattern of science itself. Not consensus but argument, not finality but tension, not closure but expansion. This too is synthesis, not erasing the disagreements but holding them as part of the process. Atlas was not one story but many, and each story, even if incomplete, widened the frame. Third, the collective future. Atlas may be gone, but it is not the last. Surveys are growing sharper, telescopes more powerful, algorithms more sensitive. We will see more interstellar visitors, dozens, perhaps hundreds in the decades ahead. And each one will add to the tapestry, each one will expand the synthesis, each one will test the paradoxes and stretch the imagination. Perhaps someday we will send missions to meet them, spacecraft designed to chase, to sample, to return. Imagine holding in your hand a fragment from another star, not theory, not inference, but substance, the touch of elsewhere. That day is coming, slowly but surely. Atlas was not an ending, it was a beginning. A first glimpse of a future where interstellar visitors are not anomalies but familiar companions. Fourth, the collective meaning. Because even as the science grows sharper, the existential question remains. What do these travelers mean to us, not as data, but as beings asking questions in the dark? They mean connection. They mean reminder. They mean proof that we are not isolated, that our solar system is not a sealed chamber, that exchange is the rule of the galaxy. And if matter exchanges, perhaps life exchanges too. If fragments wander, perhaps stories wander too. If Atlas came from beyond, perhaps so did you. The meaning is not only in what Atlas was, but in what it provokes in us. A widening of imagination, a softening of solitude, a reminder that we are part of a restless whole. The galaxy itself reframed once more. Atlas was one object, brief and fragile, yet through it the Milky Way appears differently. Not as static, not as still, not as silent, but as a living system of circulation. Stars form and scatter, planets collide and scatter, comets drift and scatter. And through all this scattering, continuity is maintained. The galaxy is not a collection of isolated systems, but a single vast metabolism, restless, exchanging, alive. Atlas was one pulse in that metabolism, and by catching it, even briefly, we caught the rhythm of the whole. Now bring the synthesis back to yourself. You are not separate from this story. You are not an observer looking out at Atlas from afar. You are part of the same circulation. The atoms in your body were scattered once, too, through stars, through dust clouds, through comets. Your very being is proof of the galaxy's continuity. So when you look at Atlas, you are not looking at something alien. You are looking at kin. You are looking at a reflection of your own impermanence, your own scattering, your own continuity. This is the ultimate synthesis, astronomy and existence folded together, the outer mirror of space reflecting the inner truth of life. And yet the story remains open. Synthesis does not close the book, it only makes it wider. Atlas is gone, but its meaning is not fixed. It continues to evolve, shaped by every new discovery, every new debate, every new reflection. In this way, Atlas is not only an interstellar traveler, it is a living question. One that will outlast the dust of its body. One that will echo as long as we keep asking. Pause here in the fullness of synthesis. Breathe into the paradoxes. Feel the continuity. Sense the galaxy as restless, impermanent, alive. Atlas was fragile, Atlas was brief, and yet Atlas was enough to shift how you see everything. That is its gift. You began with a question, where did 3i Atlas come from? You followed it through evidence, through doubt, through paradox, through synthesis. And now, at the very end, you realize the question was never meant to be closed. Atlas itself did not close, it came, it broke, it left. Its story was unfinished, unresolved. So it is only fitting that we end the same way. Picture Atlas now in your mind. Not as it was when first detected, not as it crumbled under sunlight, but as it was before wandering the galaxy. Imagine it adrift in deep space. No tail, no glow, just a dark fragment sliding silently between stars. Millions of years passing without witness. No one to see, no one to name. Only the slow pull of gravity, the endless night. That was Atlas for most of its life. Not spectacle, not story. Just silence. And perhaps that is what it has returned to now, even in fragments. Silence. But silence is not absence. Silence holds. A silence contains. A silence opens. The dust of Atlas may still drift in the solar system, invisible motes scattered across the void. A fragment may still circle faintly in darkness, too small for our instruments to catch. Some of its molecules may even, someday, settle onto a new world. Atlas is gone but not gone, changed but not ended. Its silence is not empty, it is pregnant. This is the paradox of endings. Every ending is a transformation. Every silence is a continuation in another form. You think Atlas has left, but in truth it remains. In memory, in fragments, in questions, in the widening of your perspective. It is still here, in the way you look at the night sky differently now. It is still here, in the way you feel the galaxy as restless, alive. It is still here, in the way you carry its paradoxes in your own impermanent, fluid, continuous self. Endings are never ends, they are thresholds. So what is left? Questions, only questions. How many more wander unseen? What do they carry? Do they seed life or only dust? Are we alone, or are we fragments of a wider continuity? What does origin mean in a universe without fixed beginnings? None of these will close tonight. None of these will resolve in certainty. But that is not failure, that is the gift. Because the universe is not a book with final pages. It is an unfolding, an ongoing, a story without end. Atlas was one chapter, brief, fragile, unfinished, but part of a book so vast we will never read it all. Let yourself drift now. Drift with Atlas back into the dark. Drift into the silence between stars. Drift into the endlessness where answers dissolve into questions. Feel the weight of uncertainty not as burden, but as openness. Feel the lack of closure not as absence, but as possibility. You do not need to know everything. You do not need to resolve the question. You only need to live inside it. Because that is what wonder is. Not knowing, not closing, not resolving, but standing at the edge of the unknown and letting it breathe through you. Atlas was never about its origin. Atlas was about wonder. And so the final image, this, a dark fragment drifting silently through space, not glowing, not named, not asking to be noticed, just existing. Then, briefly, a star system falls into its path. Our star system, our telescopes, our eyes, our minds. For a moment it is illuminated. For a moment we notice. For a moment we ask, where did it come from? And then it is gone again, silent, wandering, unfinished. That is Atlas, that is the universe, that is you. So the question remains open. Where did it come from? Everywhere, nowhere, from the restless continuity of the galaxy itself. Where is it now? Scattered, silent, wandering. Where will the next one come from? You do not know, and that not knowing is the point. So you end not with an answer, but with an invitation. Look up. Feel the silence. Notice the questions that rise in you, the ones that refuse to close. Let them linger, let them drift, like fragments, like Atlas, like yourself.